We've covered some great ground here. So we've spent 5 chapters getting really deep into the different kind of tactics on a psychological internal level, the different kind of principles to increase our output, problems with productivity. And I think we've laid a really good foundation to now move on to the actual system part of productivity. I mean, there's a reason we've waited this long to get into it, and maybe you can say something about that. But I'd like to now get into the system of how you actually work, because I think now that you've given the theory, that theory will kind of unlock like a deeper understanding now that I'll be able to see the systems you actually use on a daily basis.
Yeah, there's a really quick context on just why it's coming at this point. The first several pieces of our conversation were about, if you really take some of these principles, mold them to your personal context, you can get a lot done. Like, not trying to embellish it, like that's just the reality of it. You can get a lot done when you're doing aligned work, singularly focused on it, period. If the work that you're doing is something that you hate, is something that is inherently corrosive to the planet or the human collective, I don't want you to be good at doing that. And so we spent a lot of time on that, right? Aligned, ethical work, doing something that actually lights you up. Yeah. And because the more you do, the more you will do, like, goodness, you want to make sure it's doing stuff that you like. So that was the first context. What we just covered with space and intention and focus and distraction is this entire system, the entire technique or principles that we'll talk about, they only exist to help you do the one most important thing with full attention. If you're not going to do the one most important thing at a time with full focus, this whole system is useless. And so, yeah, we then went into concentration, focus, distraction. Because if you haven't gotten at least some hold of that, this won't help very much. But if, and this is why it's these stages, if you are doing something that you deeply care about, that is good for yourself, others in the world, you have a level of control kind of yourself, of your space, you've really set it up. And then, yeah, like, let's do it. Let's see how much we can actually put out, and the kind of system and techniques. They're mostly principles. There are a lot of just principles that I've messed around with and tried to fuse into one just system. They can help a lot, and they have helped me like a lot, in an incredible amount. So yeah, I think we'll do 2 things. I'll talk about a few of the actual principles or ideas or techniques, and then we can do a walkthrough of how those kind of live in my life and my system. Because again, I guess a huge asterisk as we get started, like, if these principles are already known to you, if some of them are new, like, try to remix them yourself. Again, the system that you make that works best for you will be better than any of this stuff. But I will also show like where I've landed on a bunch of this. So, all right, I'm gonna go back and forth between just a list that I have so that we can cover some of the principles. First and foremost, call this MIT, most important task. If you are going to do anything in a day, make it the most important thing. Again, sounds extremely basic, but if you did nothing else other than that, that would be it. Because again, it's far too easy. This is what we mean about distraction and context. It's far too easy to be at your office and like go get lunch and then have a conversation and then respond to a few emails, and it's 5:15 p.m. and you're like, wow, I really didn't do that one thing that I needed to do today. Imagine if your whole life you flipped that, and like every hour, every day, every week, you were like, yeah, I nailed that. I got that thing done. If you did that over years or decades, your life would be entirely different. So yeah, first principle, probably the most core principle, most important task, do the MIT. And it is a single thing, make no mistake. We'll talk about a few ways you can actually identify maybe what that is to do. But as a principle, try as much as possible to do only the most important thing. There's a really cheeky line attributed, I think, to Mark Twain this is also called eating the frog, right? If your task today is to eat a frog, do it first thing in the morning because everything else will be better after that. And it got extended to, and if you have to eat 2 frogs, eat the biggest one first. So I would take that as far as I would try to the best of your ability to literally do nothing else in your day until you've done the most important thing. And you'll see how that can actually live in a system in a second. Another one is time blocking or batching. They're kind of synonymous to me, which is actually chunk off times in your routine, in your calendar of like, this time is for this. Batching is also a similar idea. Instead of checking your email and responding 4 times a day, just do a singular big batch of emailing. And you could actually put that on your calendar, right? Like an hour of just respond to emails. This helps you kind of hold the line against everything that wants to take your time, energy, and attention. No, I'm not doing emails right now. No, sorry, I can't go out for lunch right now. I'm doing this. No, sorry. Because you have it blocked off. You know that things have a time, space, and place in your life. So time blocking is really huge. Third principle is matching the work to your energy levels or your creativity levels. This really depends on what you do. I'll toss a link as well to something called the maker versus the manager schedule. If you're a maker, you want a lot of really deep, uninterrupted time. So actually, the way you could do this is something like, 9 a.m. to noon is just deep work time. Literally, it lives on the calendar. You take no meetings in that spot. You don't do emails in that spot. That is just deep work, creative time. If it's something bigger and more challenging, you should do it when you have the most energy. For some people, that's early in the morning. For some people, that's late at night. Like this is a very good example of tailoring or customizing these systems for yourself, because the morning person should have a completely different system than the late night crew. So yeah, match your work to your energy levels. Like most of the time your email you don't need to be high energy, particularly if you batch it. Like put it towards the end of your day or put it towards the lowest energy that you have. Save your energy for really big, meaty things. Fourth principle is have a backlog, a task backlog, which is basically, it eats up a lot of time, energy, and concentration to try to always be figuring out what you need to do. Right? It gets really annoying. It actually interrupts your flow a lot of the time. So actually, if you have a single project, right, if it's setting up a blog, if it's a project that you have to do for work, take a few minutes and actually try to write down every possible thing that you would need to do in that. And then you can prioritize them and start doing them one by one. But then once you've finished a few, you're not then like sitting there thinking of like, okay, what comes next? Like I did that. Maybe I should go over this direction. It's actually just like, oh no, I have it right here. Let me start on this one. So having a backlog is fantastic. Cool. The last two are really straightforward. One is prioritize, right? Do more important things first. Sounds ridiculously obvious, but again, it's sneaky how easy it is to start doing mindless emails before the report that you actually need to do. Like, prioritize what you need to do and do them first. Give more important things more value and more time and more energy and more attention. And again, sounds really easy, really difficult to do when there are so many small things that give you that little hit of accomplishment that other people are asking of you so they feel more urgent. You really have to be militant with time, energy, and attention, and prioritizing things goes a long way to do that. We'll walk through a really straightforward way to prioritize stuff. The very last one we've already touched on, but it is a absolutely core principle, so I won't say much more on it, which is single task. Stop multitasking. Period. Do not try to do that. It is not a battle that you can win. It doesn't even help you. Actually, the way to say this is it negatively impacts the meaning and purpose that you feel in your life. That's significant when you frame it that way. So stop multitasking, period. Yeah, I mean, so maybe just to recap those, right? Do the most important thing. Block out your time. Match your work to your energy levels. Have a backlog of stuff so that you don't need to figure out what to do next. Prioritize that backlog so you're doing the most important things in that order, and single task them when you do them. That's essentially that's the principles of this whole thing. And actually, people could stop and try to map some of those to their own life. You can start weaving a principle in one thing at a time, right? Doing them all at once can be overwhelming, can be confusing. So actually pulling each one of those in one at a time could be really helpful. There's a really nice framework that actually changed a lot of how I work, and you'll see it like weaved in very centrally to the system that I use. It's called the 1-3-5 technique, and it's basically one huge task, like one most important task, 3 significant or important tasks, and then 5 just like have to do tasks. If you can do that a day, and like literally, we can make a template. You can make it yourself, like make a box with one big thing, make 3 bullet points, and then 5 really small bullet points. If you just filled that up the night before and then did it the next day, you would absolutely quintuple what you can do, because you'd be doing the most important thing. You'd be doing things that still need to get done for it. And you'd be able to take care of like life stuff, like plan the trip and answer the emails and take your dog for a walk and go buy the shopping. Like none of these things have to come at the expense of your life. And the 1-3-5 framework is absolutely exceptional, basically in its simplicity. So those are basically everything that went into the system. And we can do a walkthrough, actually, what that looks like and how people can start mapping it for themselves. All right. So we're going to do a walkthrough of what my system actually in setup looks like. I want to flag again that just because it looks this way for me does not mean it needs to look this way for you. There's a strong argument where it actually shouldn't look this way for you, because this was made for me and yours will be made for you. With that little caveat, let's jump in. So I'm actually going to stop here because this is my desktop, and this is what I mean by ruthlessly killing all distraction, right? Hide the menu bar, get rid of icons, hide the dock, get rid of as many dock stuff, no notifications, no pings, no little boxes in the corners, like literally nothing. If you're using apps, like only use the app that you actually need, full screen the app if you can, just mercilessly killing distractions, and B, being as close to singularly single focused as you can muster. So I'm going to walk through a few principles. You'll see some of the principles that we just talked about, like in action, and I will, speak to it. It's relatively straightforward. So both during a day and if I'm starting a new project, I'll have a kind of like scratch pad, which is basically just if there's something I need to remember that I don't want in my head, I'll just write it down and deal with it later. This is also how I do like backlogs, like really just figuring out. So if I'm about to start with writing a piece, new post, I can just start breaking down, right? Introduction, full body draft, title / headlines, images, optimize, post, promo, right? This is now just the itemized list of what I need to do. And you could do that for smaller tasks. You could also do that for much larger projects, right? But at least now you have the backlog. The way this lives for me, so sometimes if I'm just on a call or if I'm doing something else, I'll have these things and I'll then bring them into my, at least the to-do app or the doing app that I use. I use an app called Slash. Shout out to Jordan Lejeune for this beauty. Slash I really like because it is so ridiculously single focused. That is literally all it does. And it lets you pull in backlogs, use priorities. I want to start with something else. Because once you have the backlog, you need to prioritize it. This is my favorite image for how to prioritize something. It's called the Eisenhower matrix. I'll put a link and I'll put this photo in. It's basically a 2x2 matrix of important and not important and urgent and not urgent. All right, so if something is both urgent and important, it goes top left, which is just do it. It's extremely important and it's time sensitive, so do it. If something is important but not urgent, so it's not time sensitive, it goes into schedule, which is basically it needs to get done. So mark it in your calendar, like schedule it, literally schedule it. If it's urgent but not important, delegate it, right? It just needs to get done. It's time sensitive, but it actually doesn't move the needle on anything. So let me try to get rid of it. This could be outsourcing it. This could be delegating it to team members. If it's for you, it could just be kicking it down the line a little bit. And the final one, which actually in many cases is often the most important one, which is if it's not urgent, it's not time sensitive, and it's not important, like it doesn't matter if it gets done, do not do it at all. Meetings, emails, a lot of stuff falls into this bucket. Try as much as possible to eliminate it. What you will end up with in doing this, so this is like a 2-step process, right? Make the entire backlog, list out everything that you think you want to do, that you need to do, that you should do, and try to plot it in this matrix, right? What do I need to do first? What should be scheduled? What should be dropped? What should be delegated? Once you have this becomes the material for the 1-3-5 technique, right? You have one most important thing. That's the do first bucket. You have 3 important things. That's the schedule them. And then you have 5 just basic things that need to get done. That's often the delegate one or other things in life that aren't work focused. So now we have our slots, right? We have the 1-3-5s. We know what the most important ones are. We know what ones we just need to do, and we have a space to do all the other ones. This is an example, but I will show you. Oh, this is hard. Yeah, so let's talk about the Eisenhower matrix for a second and how you can actually use it and how I have actually used it and where it kind of lives in my life right now. The first answer, which may be cheeky, but I think is also important, which is a lot of these things we've been using scaffolding or structure or support. Training wheels might also be a really good metaphor. Like, use it to build the muscle, but you don't need it forever. There are a lot of categories. I think the way it has come up and it currently lives for me is that there are categories of tasks that basically fall into these buckets, right? Almost email entirely is either 3 or 4. It's delegate or don't do it. Like, ignore as much of it as possible. There are other entire categories of tasks. Like, for me, writing an article, like content creation, is largely schedule. It's very rarely the most fundamental thing I need to do, but given the work that we do and that I find myself in, is actually incredibly important. So actually scheduling it out, content creation basically lives in that entire category. And then there are several. I think if someone is deeply honest with themselves, or if you sit still and silent for long enough, the most important do first task will easily present itself to you. If you genuinely ask what is most important that I need to do, it will often come up. It also is just apparent over time, right? Paying the team, accounting is a huge one that just needs to get done. Setting up a product, right? Actually engaging with people. These are often things that come up. So actually for me, it's mostly categories of tasks, but I only stumbled into that over extended time of actually trying to do this. Like, this is the same thing as the nightly ritual, right? Like, if you're going to have a nightly ritual, you can actually use it prioritizing stuff. What is most important of the 18 things I wrote down that I still need to do? And put them in this. Get a template. There are a lot of templates. I'll find one or I'll make one. I'll put it in the resources. When I first started using this, I literally mapped stuff into this and into these buckets and used the buckets then to pick what came next. I don't anymore sit and do that, but that's because it comes on the other side of that, of having done it, and it becomes more embodied, just like most people who ride two-wheeled bicycles started with training wheels and moved beyond it. I think it's so helpful to build in the muscle of understanding what's important work and what's not important work, that it's worth actually doing it and like mapping stuff that you need to do into these categories. It also works extremely well with the rest of the system. So it's actually just super helpful to do. Taking this, we basically have 3 categories of tasks, right? We've got the extremely important, most important task. We've got the core scheduled tasks, and we've got the kind of dharma taking care of things. The don't do ones should never find their way onto your calendar because you shouldn't be doing them. So we have basically 3. I made a sample of what time blocking on a calendar could look like, actually mapped out to this. This is yet another thing where for literally years of my life, my calendar looked like this. It currently doesn't because the nature of my work has shifted. I'm in more of a managerial role than a maker role right now. But for literally several years of my life, my calendar looked like this. And so coming off of the Eisenhower matrix, right, the most important task, the core ones that need to be scheduled, and the small ones that just need to get done, literally mapped them right here. There are a few fantastic things about this that I like. And you'll notice, like, this is really how a lot of the principles like take shape on a day-to-day basis. So the first one is the first thing you do when you start working is the most important task, right? Do nothing in your day other than that. And if for whatever reason, like you get distracted or you're having a bad day and you can't start it until the afternoon, good. Like, you still just start with that thing. So putting the most important task first is huge. It also matches the importance of tasks to your energy level, right? If it is the most important, it deserves the most energy. I have the most energy right after I wake up. So that comes first. It gives you space for the 3. And I literally mapped these based on, I gave the amount of time they have to their level of importance. So the most important task, the kind of deep work thing, is a 2-hour block. It's actually really hard to focus intensely beyond that. All of the singular schedule core tasks have an hour booked out. All of the smaller ones have half an hour. And quite frankly, you almost never need half an hour for the smaller ones. You can almost get all of them done in like half an hour to an hour. The crazy thing about this, and the crazy thing that I came to like see from this and experience from this, is, my God, if you can replicate this over weeks and months of your life, it's crazy. It's actually crazy the amount of stuff you can get done, because it's twofold. One is, if we're being a little cheeky, if you did all of this in a day, it's probably what you and or most people normally do in a week, right? Because of distractions and multitasking and getting lost and walking over to your coworker or just taking calls or cruising social. Like, this is about the amount of work that actually happens in a typical week. Like the very most important thing, a few other important things, and a bunch of small stuff. And if you can start doing this in a day, it's unbelievable. But the other thing that I really like about it is this itself really maps out to about 7 to 8 hours of time if you actually did exactly this. So it's not even beyond a typical working schedule, including breaks inside of it. So it's still a nice, it's balanced enough that you can sustain it because it has breaks built in, which is also huge, really helpful. So you have things blocked off, right? You have your backlog, you prioritized it, you have space for the priorities that each are given their own deserved amount of time. And I basically put them in this. At this point, it doesn't matter what app you want to use, right? The technology is almost irrelevant. I use Slash. I really like Slash for several reasons, mostly because it's extremely simple and it's single task focused. So this is a super cheeky example. I actually just put them in according to those blocks, right? So you can have a big backlog of what you want. This is literally all I'll do in a week. Just write out my entire backlog, and you can start at the beginning of your week, end of your week, drag them over into what you want to get done this week. And then as you sit down, start your day, you can drag them all over, load them up. What I like most about this is that it literally only gives me one thing to do a day, which is get to the end of my list. And that way it becomes a kind of game. It's like they're all mapped out here in front of me. All I need to do is sit down, start, and it actually keeps it present. You can see on the bottom, it actually keeps it present on your screen of just like, this is what you should be doing. Do this.
Great.
And that reminder is really helpful. Like that's a really nice touch. But then at the end, you complete it. It actually gives you a little, celebration, and then you can just keep going until you have finished your list. Anything for whatever reason you don't finish, you just bring back to the next day. And I mean, that is the entire thing. So I'm actually I'm gonna stop sharing because that's how the whole list lives. But I mean, you'll notice if you start looking back through that, like that incorporates almost every principle we spoke about. That's time blocking, most important task, matching tasks to energy level, single tasking, prioritizing, making backlogs. It's really just not, it might look complicated, but honestly, the day-to-day execution is extremely simple. It's selecting what you need to do today, filling those time buckets. You have the time in your day because it's literally in your calendar, and it becomes a kind of game of, okay, I have my list, let's do it. And that is largely how this has come to live for me. And I have kept, there has been minor variations, like in some of the apps, in how I schedule some of this stuff, but I have kept that system for, God, years now. Basically exactly as is. It's not necessarily fancy. It's not necessarily high tech. There's no crazy algorithms or automations, but I mean, it just works. It's extremely straightforward. Like, and isn't that what you were looking for when you started this adventure at the end of the day? Like, just something simple that works. It's not overly confusing, and it lets you get a hell of a lot done relatively simply.
The fact that you haven't modified this much for a long time shows that you found a really nice balance between your kind of internal kind of issues with, you know, shiny object syndrome, you know, like you found like a relaxation there with the system that you're using, and also on an external level, something that actually works, right? Like it's the marriage of both, because you can have an amazing system, but you could be agitated and stressed and sort of like always be looking for the new thing, or you can be very relaxed and just have a poor system, right? So it's like, yeah, it's not very good, but I don't want to change it. Whereas this system works, it's great, helps you be consistent, and you're generally content as well using it, which is going back to the very first conversation that we had. I said one of the things that I really like about your approach to productivity is that you get a lot done, but you don't seem overly stressed and agitated. Anyone who knows you will often say that you appear calm, relaxed, grounding, right? Like you don't seem like you've had like 25 coffees today, you know? And yet you're still getting a lot of stuff done. And that's the thing I think we're all looking for. Super cool.
Yeah, and I mean, just to recognize as well, this is solely on the context of personal work and personal output. We're actually building a fairly intense, like team level system in Notion for high existence, right? It's not like we have something that simple, but there will never be a day, regardless of what we set up, where I don't, even at the expense of double work, like start pulling tasks from Notion into that system for myself, because that's just how I work. It hasn't broken yet. It balances a lot. And yeah, like if it doesn't work, like again, I think there's a returning question here of like, do you want to spend all your time trying to figure out how you do work instead of just sitting down and getting to work? I certainly don't. I certainly haven't felt the pain or missed opportunity of this enough yet to change it. Like things are going super well. Yeah, I don't think I have much beyond that.
The classic Marcus Aurelius line, stop arguing what a good person should be and just be one. It applies right here, right? Like stop arguing about the perfect system and actually just use the one that's good enough for now and go to work. It's quite the power.
Yep. Yeah, and this is I've said this several times in this series of start at zero and only add as you need more complexity. This is an example of it. Like I started from literally nothing, built up, added in a few apps, tweaks, tricks, techniques as they were necessary. But actually, it's never become necessary to go beyond this. There was actually a time in my life where I did all of this analog. Both you and I have used physical analog paper planners. I actually did that for a fair amount of time. Eventually, it just got both easier and necessary to have a lot of my stuff stored digitally. And so I made the transition to digital and put the whole system digitally. But yeah, things have Things have not advanced to a level of complexity that requires anything other than that. And this has been an underlying thread in a lot of what we've spoken about so far, which is I don't think the vast majority of people need anything more advanced than the basics. Because again, you don't need, and I'm sure many people don't want to be focused on how they do work all the time. So get it out of the way. Get something that works and just start actually using it, using it for what it was meant to be used for, getting shit done.